Good afternoon and welcome to a new season of Puck Drop, Season 5, Episode 1, brought to you with new hosts. I'm Alex Weiss, Zane Ginsberg, Eli Gorin joining me here today. We have a lot to cover in today's episode, so let's get started right with our season preview for the upcoming 2023-24 campaign. And Eli, what are you looking at coming into the season?
Well, I think for this season, it's definitely the most expectations I think any of us have had for the Devils in a long time. You see this top nine, which is loaded with stars, solid players. Like the top nine, I don't think there's a single bad player on there. So for me, I'm expecting a top 5 finish in the NHL, a top 2 finish in the Metro, maybe a Metro title. You could even expect a President's Trophy win potentially if everything goes right.
I think it's fair to manage, even with managed expectations, conservatively, you have to be looking at one of the top 3 spots in the Metropolitan Division, certainly competing for that regular season Metro title. Zane, what do you think?
Well, yeah, this is a young and fun Devils team. They have a lot of talented players throughout their lineup. And listen, they're going to be competitive. They're going to be in every game, and you're going to see them playing competitive hockey for a long time this season.
And you mentioned the President's Trophy, Eli. That's certainly something that's not out of reach. They were 3rd in the league in terms of points in the standings last season, only a point behind Carolina with the same amount of regulation wins. So the big question that's facing the Devils this season specifically is, are they going to be able to repeat that, go on the magical run that they did, especially in the first half of the season where they won 13 games in the month of December, which was unheard of and is a very rare thing to see in the NHL, especially in today's game where there's so many upsets and it's essentially a coin flip some nights as to which team is going to win what game. And I think that's something that Devils fans need to manage their expectations with and kind of expect that there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off from where they were last season. But like you said, the talent is still there. One of, if not the most talented lineup on paper in the NHL. So something to look forward to for sure. And with that, go ahead, Eli.
I was about to say the Devils have a lot of young players on this team. Like we have Hughes, Holtz, Nemec, Ball. It really depends on how these young players develop, and if they develop like where they're supposed to, this team could go all the way. And obviously, Carolina is a very talented team. It also depends on how they do. So I think it's gonna be very close between the Devils and Hurricanes all year long for the Metro title.
And yeah, so building off what both of you have said, the expectations are higher than ever this year. And yeah, it's a young team, but you got to expect progression, throughout the season. I definitely think that this team has the skill. They have the, they play like a core. You can see that within, Hughes and Hamilton. They play well together, and I expect to see them get better as the season progresses. You mentioned the young names, and I'm excited to see how it plays out.
And we'll touch on this a little bit later, but that core you mentioned, Hughes, Hamilton, Hischier, Bratt, Timo Meier now in the mix after signing an 8-year extension during the offseason. This is a really talented core, and one of the youngest cores in hockey. Jack Hughes only going into his 5th season, Nico in his 7th, Bratt in his 7th. So these guys now, they're still young where they're approaching and getting into their primes, but they're old enough now where they have the experience. Now these guys have playoff experience, and it's really something to look forward to going into this season. And with that said, now let's take a look at how we think the Metro Division is going to shake out this season. Eli, we'll start with you. 8 teams, 8 spots, potential 5 in the playoffs. What do you think?
I think it's really tricky. Obviously, I said 1 and 2, Devils, Hurricanes. I try to lower my expectations low, so I'm putting the Devils at 2, Hurricanes at 1. Hurricanes, they're still a really talented team. We lost them in the playoffs. They have Svechnikov coming back. We lost them without Svechnikov and Teravainen, 2 of their best players. They brought in some new young players. They brought in Michael Bunting. He's a very talented player. So I have the Hurricanes above the Devils, even though it could go the other way, and it probably will be very close. 3 and 4, I think, will be Penguins and Rangers around. I think Penguins 3, Rangers 4, with the Rangers making the playoffs as a wild card spot. I think Columbus is going to improve and go to 5. The Islanders are going to be pretty close to them at 6, and then the Capitals and Flyers finishing out the Metro at 7 and 8.
Yeah, I happen to agree with a lot of what you said there. Hurricanes, Devils, like you said, it could be a toss-up between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Obviously, my bias says the Devils are going to be 1. I certainly want them to be 1, but realistically, right now the Hurricanes have the edge. They're a little bit more physical. They play a bit of a grittier game that'll help them out in the long run, and they have the experience as well. which especially becomes important once you get into the postseason. So with that said, Hurricanes 1, Devils 2. I'm going to disagree with you with your 3 and 4. I think the Rangers do end up coming third as they did last season. As it pains me to say, as long as the Devils are ahead of them, you can't complain. But they have a very solid core there in New York. I expect a massive season from Artemi Panarin after having an essentially non-existent playoff series last year. Zibanejad's going to take a step forward. Kreider, we know, can put 40 goals in the back of the net. And obviously, when they have one of, if not the best goaltender in the league, in Igor Shesterkin. So I think that they're going to get that third lock in the playoff spot in the Metro. But then Penguins are going to be right behind them at 4. Chris Letang, great addition this offseason. 5, Islanders, I think, with Sorokin and Varlamov as their goaltending tandem, one of the best in hockey. They're always going to be competing. Capital 6, I still, any team with Alex Ovechkin on it is going to win games. They just have that experience, that captaincy. Blue Jackets at 7, Fantilli was a great draft choice, but I still don't see them taking the necessary strides to compete for a playoff spot, and that leaves the Flyers finishing out the basement. What do you think, Zane?
Well, I have it pretty much identical to you. I would just change those last two. I have Columbus finishing at the bottom, Flyers second to last. But really, I want to touch on the Hurricanes and Devils aspect. After all, this is a Devils talk show, really. But listen, I think, obviously the young talent is there for the Devils, and I think we're going to see them succeed for a long time. However, strictly this season, it'd be silly to pick the Devils to pick the Devils over the Hurricanes after what we've seen last season and obviously in the postseason. So I'll give the edge to Carolina, and I'd be gladly proved wrong. That being said, I'll touch on the Rangers and Islanders, and you already know about the bottom half of that Metropolitan Division. But listen, with the goaltending both the Islanders and Rangers have, it's not going to be easy to beat them. I don't care who their skaters are. So getting shots on goal is going to be huge, and I think that's really what the Devils and Hurricanes do really nicely, which will set the edge there.
So now we know how the Metro is going to shake up, but now let's focus more internally. Within the New Jersey Devils organization, we had a very exciting offseason. Obviously, we had some big moves, the extensions for both Jesper Bratt and Timo Meier. Taking a look at it here now, we re-signed Eric Halla, trading away Mackenzie Blackwood, Tyler Toffoli, obviously the biggest addition this offseason, trading him from Calgary in exchange for Yegor Sharangovich. So a lot of exciting players coming and going out of this Devils lineup. So Eli, we'll start with you once again. Who's one guy that you're really looking forward to seeing how they pan out this season?
Well, obviously we have a lot of young and new guys coming in, but the player I want to focus on is someone who's been in the organization for a long time and has been on the team for about, I think, 5 years now. That's Michael McLeod. Last year, his regular season, again, disappointing. He was a first-round draft pick, I believe 10th overall in 2016. Hasn't really worked out. Scored 26 points in 80 games last year. But then in the playoffs, he scored 6 points in 12 games, which was a big improvement. And I think he was the best player in that Carolina series. Obviously, it was a rough series for the Devils, but I think especially in the later half of the series, McLeod really stood out to me. He played a physical game. He was fast. He created chances. He's amazing shorthanded. And I think watching in the preseason, he's just gotten 10 times faster. He's still strong on the puck. He creates chances. He drives to the net. I think this is finally going to be McLeod's breakout year. I really like how he's looked so far.
McLeod's certainly one of the best fourth-line centers in the league, and that was kind of a common theme out of Devils training camp, is that the whole team seemed to have gotten a step faster, and that's obviously going to be huge. The Devils are a team that beat you with speed, and they know they can beat you with speed. You also touched upon his penalty-killing abilities, which is going to be huge. The best teams have the best special teams, and I think that's going to be a massive factor as well as we head into this season. I was looking at a guy who is relatively new, signed a massive deal this offseason. Timo Meier, now wearing number 28, came over from San Jose, had 14 points in 21 games in the regular season, and then was essentially non-existent in the playoff series, both against the Rangers and against Carolina, whereas Michael McLeod, as you had mentioned, was great in the playoffs, scored a terrific goal against the Rangers in Game 7, I believe it was. That really turned the tide of that game and was a big factor in the Devils edging them out. But I think Timo Meier, the best from him is yet to come in a Devils uniform. He's so exciting to watch. 40 goals last season. He has such a nose for the net, and I think that we're going to really start to see that this season as he gets more comfortable in the system, getting acquainted with his line mates, as of right now, seem to be Nico Hischier in the middle and Alex Holtz on the right wing. So obviously it's a bit of a feeling out process and only time will tell, but Timo Meier is someone that I'm very excited to see in this lineup to start the season.
Well, yeah, when you talk about players you want to keep an eye on this season, I think it's impossible to talk about that aspect without mentioning Tyler Toffoli. Tyler Toffoli scoring 34 goals, 39 assists in Calgary last season. Devils acquired him in a trade, and he's going to provide offense to a team that already has a strong suit in offense. It's going to be really, really amazing to watch this team play. Toffoli will play on the first line with Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt, and he'll even be on the second power play line. That's remarkable to even think about, and the capabilities are endless. I mean, he's going to have a phenomenal year and hopefully replicate a career year last year.
He has 73 points, career highs in both goals and assists, and you mentioned that second power play. Amanda Stein tweeted it earlier today. Devils' first power play group, Alex Holtz, Nico Hischier, Dawson Mercer, Timo Meier, and Dougie Hamilton acting as the quarterback, leaving Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Andre Palat, Tyler Toffoli, and the younger Luke Hughes on the second power play group. So you really have a 1A and 1B when it comes to their power play, and we talked about in brief the special teams, how important that would be. So that's definitely something that we'll talk about more as the season goes on. But Tyler Toffoli, like you said, bringing offense to a team that already has extreme firepower on the front end, and that's going to be extremely exciting to see. But Zane, we also talked about before the show something that might be an area of concern, or something certainly to keep an eye on, is the defense on this roster, specifically the young defensemen. So why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's right. I mean, there's a lot of young talent in this defense, but the problem is when they're young, that's when the inexperience comes into play, and a lot of mistakes can occur because of that. And so it's important that the Devils are clean on defense. They play in transition. That's their strength. They have speed. And guys like Luke Hughes, obviously Nemec, and obviously Ball too, if they could incorporate them into their offensive attack and limit those careless mistakes that you see in inexperienced defensemen, I mean, the sky's the limit for this team, and that's really the key to their success this season.
Well, focusing now still on the back end, Eli, goaltending, massive concern, not concern, but it's an area of question heading into this season with Vanacek and Schmid being the tandem coming into the season. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, obviously, I'm a little concerned about it. You look at the playoffs last year, Schmid, I don't know how to pronounce it. I've seen it both ways, but he was inconsistent during the playoffs. He had his good games. He had the majority of the games he played against the Rangers were good, but then you also have those game six against the Rangers where he played awful, and then you have the majority of the series against Carolina where he really wasn't that good either. And then you got Vanacek, who was really bad the whole playoffs. Pretty much any time he came in, he was letting up goals left and right. But then in the regular season, they were both solid goalies, and I think if they play the way they played last year in the regular season, we'll be fine. But obviously a little concerning. Schmid, young goalie, you really don't know how he's going to pan out. Vanacek, got to see a little bit of him last year. But again, he's just such an inconsistent goalie. Throughout the regular season, he had stretches of good where he was posting shutouts and only letting up 1 or 2 goals every game. Then you see stretches of him where he was letting up 5-6 goals every game, and he has to be more consistent.
Well, with Schmidt in particular, you almost have to have a little bit of worry that you're going to have another Mackenzie Blackwood situation.
That's right.
A young goaltender drafted by the Devils, who then shows signs of really maturing and growing as a goaltender, possible star in the NHL, but never really figures it out. And the problem with Blackwood was injury, and knock on wood here that Schmid doesn't have to deal with any of that kind of stuff. But you have to, as a Devils fan, it's almost like we've seen this story before, and you have to hope that it pans out differently this time, obviously, in the Devils' favor. And with that said, we're going to transition to the front end now with a little bit of offensive firepower from both offense and defense, those being the Hughes brothers. We'll focus on Jack first, who broke the single-season scoring record for the Devils franchise last season. 43 goals, 56 assists for 99 points in 78 games. Goals, assists, and points were all career highs for Jack. That was in the regular season, and then in the playoffs, he continued playing the way he does. 11 points in 12 games, 6 goals to go with 5 assists. So certainly letting his name be known in the playoffs as well, which could not be said about a lot of the guys who were great in the regular season for the Devils. Luke Hughes only played, however, 2 regular season games, 2 points in those games. So he's a career point per game player, including the game winner in overtime of the season finale, assisted by his brother. And then he also saw limited action in the playoffs, 2 assists in 3 games for the younger Hughes brother. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how they pan out with a full season together, being able to have that chemistry, being on the same power play unit. And I was interested to get your guys' thoughts on how that could be a really big part in a good way or a really disappointing part of the Devils season this year.
Yeah, well, I think Hughes pretty much is the Devils team. Like, he's their star player. Yeah, Jack.
Yeah.
He's their star player. He's like, he got them 99 points last year. If he gets hurt or if he doesn't play as well, the Devils are going to be significantly worse this year. And Luke, he's now a big part of the defense. And I think watching him in the preseason, his offensive ability, there's no question about it. He's the most talented offensively gifted player defensively on this Devils team. There is some question marks around his defense, and that's really going to affect the Devils this year.
And I think just to speak to that, you're going to see a lot of time of him paired with either John Marino or Jonas Siegenthaler, 2 of the best shutdown defensemen in the league. They're not going to go out and score 40 points from the back end, but you know they're going to be paired up against the other team's top line, and they're going to shut them down. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Hughes and Nemec as well be paired with one of these 2 guys. And just briefly, Zane, what are your thoughts on the Hughes brothers heading into the season?
Well, yeah, just to touch on Luke Hughes real quick. Obviously, we know his offense is going to be a factor in his game, but I really want to see his defense progress this season. I think if he's able to do that, he'll be more of a balanced player, and the coaches can feel comfortable with him on the ice, both when they need a goal and to defend a goal. And then, of course, to touch on Jack Hughes, this guy is one of the best players in the NHL. Period. When he's on his game, it's very hard to stop him, and it's as simple as that. I mean, he's the best player on this team.
Yeah, Jack was ranked 11 in the league by NHL Network in the countdown coming into this season, the 11th best player in the league as voted by the writers, and he seemed to have taken a step forward. I mean, only time will tell, but he seems in the preseason so far so confident with the puck, seems to be directing traffic out there, seems more confident as he gains experience. And just, Eli, one more point briefly before we wrap up.
Well, something I really liked to see in the preseason game was that Hughes line, especially last night against the Islanders. I was at the game. Anytime that Hughes, Toffoli, Bratt line stepped on the ice, they were creating offensive chances. They were on the ice for 5 of the 6 Devils goals. They were just creating chances every time they stepped on the ice. Toffoli was making great passes, and especially when Luke was out there too, the offense was just unstoppable.
And I was watching from home, and to put it in Jack Hughes' words, that line had some great meaning chemistry. And Jesper Bratt credited that to Tyler Toffoli being able to see the game in a similar way, see the same lanes that Jack and Jesper were to see. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram if you don't already, at PuckDropLTV. For Zane Ginsberg, Eli Gorin, I'm Alex Weiss, saying thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.